perfectly legal, but it's illegal to carry a dildo.
You know what? If you can suddenly modify a dildo to fire 22 caliber bullets, that's our solution.
If you turn a dildo into a weapon, it becomes.
It doesn't even have to be like a firing gun either. Just make a cutlass. just use the fleshlight as the hilt.
You can't fuck with me, Yankees. I've got the ultimate bayonet on my rifle.
Okay. I probably should have been straightforward about
that. My 69th amendment.
Just go to fucking therapy.
If I develop Sims, delete the channel.
We need to start a revolution.
And you know what? I'm gonna say it.
All of them are fucking idiots.
25 is technically you.
Say your morning routine.
And that's fucking it. Excuse me?
Where my Grisha's at? Yo.
I'd like you to rephrase that, Sam.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dean, and welcome back to the InkGuild Podcast. Tonight, I have Gabe.
Hello.
Brooke.
Hi.
Marie-Soleil.
Hello.
And Tyler.
Bonjour.
Today, we are talking about honoring creative vision. I think this, for all of the pretty chaotic episodes that we've been having lately, if you've been watching our episodes in sequential order, you would kind of know that we've had like really, really long sessions too, on top of it being absolutely chaotic. And as fun as they are, I did want to, I think for tonight's episode, it's probably good to just take it a little bit slowly this time and kind of go back to the topic kind of centered roundtable discussion that we've typically been doing with these podcasts. Just because I think when it comes to creative vision, because we are all creatives to a degree, you know, creative writers, creative musicians, creative artists, it's a very personal, it's a very personal topic because it varies between all of us when it comes to our individual creative vision. So I believe how tonight will work then, we'll be going through a set list of topics for tonight, kind of going through, sharing our opinions, providing examples when necessary. I don't anticipate it to be a long night. However, do keep in mind that when you're tuning in with us, that it could very well be just an hour or maybe an hour and a half. Who knows? With that also being said, we have no check-in. We have no mid-episode segment, just because it's not that we're getting tired of doing those things. It's just that we've had so much to talk about lately, and quite frankly, it's kind of hard to squeeze these in nowadays. But I think, yeah, all preliminaries out of the way. When discussing honoring creative vision, I think we should probably start at our individual creative visions respectively. If you kind of go back towards the channel, you can, we have each introduced ourselves as creative people. We have also brought up our own creative writing goals, or, creative goals in general, I think, not just specific to creative writing. And I think for anyone tuning in just now, I think maybe it'd be a good time for our opening discussion, let's just kind of go through those writing goals again. Because when we started the podcast, I stated my writing goals, or Gabe and I started our writing goals in the first episode. Marie-Soleil stated hers in her fourth episode, and then, it kind of goes whenever everyone was kind of introduced. That's when we stated our writing goals as per introductions. So yeah, I think let's just kind of each go through our writing goal, like our creative our creative goals, I guess. I guess for me, my writing goal is still to finish Xeno, which is, again, obviously like the big project that I've been speaking about tons on this podcast. Currently I am at chapter 22, which is nearing the end of Act 3 because I've kind of divided the story into 3 sequential acts, kind of like in a movie. And lately I've just been feeling a lot more confident with my pacing. Like, I think it's more or less just become stronger, my will to write, basically. Like, I can see the end of the tunnel clearly now than I ever have. But yeah, I think writing goal wise, it's still to finish Xeno. However, since I've introduced that in episode 1, my writing goals have changed in the way that I'm not just writing prose anymore. And I say that because obviously with the InkGuild and everything that we have been putting out on Spotify, YouTube, our social media, I've pretty much just been working a lot on this brand. Like, and I think as a creative person, my goal has been to help establish it, like help not only keep my editing skills in touch, but like give all of us like a platform to freely talk about our stories and freely talk about our like creative writing passions, I guess. And while it feels like that hasn't changed, like I personally consider it a big change because like it's taken up so much of my time personally, but I don't think it's for the worst. Like, this has been like it's been and still is a really fun hobby. So yeah, I think just as another really quick thing, I don't want to take up too much time, but like when I say I'm not just writing prose anymore, I've also gotten a better hand at poetry, though I don't do much of that lately. Not because I'm kind of insecure about any kind of like, you know, if my prose is better than poetry or whatever, but just like, I don't know, I just haven't, me writing prose goal wise is more important than me writing poetry. I guess like I want to publish a novel before I even consider publishing a poetry collection. But yeah, that's, I guess, an update on my creative writing goal, or my creative goal, I guess, in general. Let's touch in with Gabe on his. So again, like I had said, Gabe introduced his creative writing goals in episode 1 when we first launched the podcast. So let's just see where he's kind of gone from there.
I think my goals are basically the same. I want to finish my I'm working on a novel right now called Lemon Heart, and my current like main goal is to get that done by the end of 2021. I don't know if I want to get it like finished and like out and like sent out by the end of 2021, but I want to get at least like the first draft done so that I can like start the process on doing that by the end of the year. That's kind of where I'm at right now. I have other projects that I have like on the back burner, but I think like, yeah, it's like you said, like right now I really have to like I really just had to like put those projects on hold and just like not think about them and not like spend a lot of time worrying about like the other shit that I kind of vaguely want to do when I have this thing that I feel like I have a little progress on, and I want to like expand on that through the summer, because I feel like the summer is going to be like a really good opportunity to just write like a machine. So that's basically my goal right now.
Right. Yeah, so I guess more or less it hasn't really changed. You're kind of when we were working on, I think like what's really changed from what I've noticed is what you've been working on, because when we first started the podcast, your goal was to I think you were focusing primarily on like short horror and some excerpts of Glass Inferno, but then like I think come last fall you have been exclusively working on Lemon Heart.
When we started the podcast, I was sort of in the peak of my like horror writing intro, where I was just like I was like, man, I really like writing fucking horror. I want to do this more. So I just did that like a bunch, and then I think it was around September, No, it was around August that it was in August that I like had the initial idea that became Lemon Heart, and then like over between semester and January, I started like developed that idea, and now it's like it's where it is now.
Mm-hmm. But that I guess like you haven't stopped completely writing horror or Glass Inferno. They were more just like on the back burner, I guess, right? I
still have my long-term projects to write Glass Inferno and to write Highway Shopping Center, which is I don't know if I mentioned that before. It's another project I'm working on, which is it's basically just an anthology. But those are on my back burner right now, and I'm not focusing on those, and I'm not trying to. I'm like, if I have an idea for either, I'll like write it down and just get out of my head, because I need to focus on my actual goal.
Right. Cool. Okay, so we've checked in with both Gabe and I. Let's now check in with Marie-Soleil, actually, because she debuted with us in episode 4 of season 1, and in that episode, I guess, just to quickly kind of summarize what we did, we talked about Marie-Soleil and just her, her as a writer, her upbringing and stuff as a creative person in the latter half. So in the former half. So it's been quite a while since we've checked in with you about like your writing goals and whatnot.
I feel like my writing goal is just to finish writing something, because I've got so many works in progresses and none of them particularly stick out, but they keep changing. Because I keep telling myself this is going to just be a fun short story or a creepy short story, and then it's like, actually, I could do so much more with this. But in the long run, I just want to finish something and have someone read it and be inspired by it, or have it impact them in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So ultimately, again, like the goal hasn't really changed. Like you've said before in previous episodes, that you want your writing to resonate. But I guess more or less it's just like, which story is it going to be? If I may ask, is there one right now that you're kind of like putting more emphasis on?
I've been toying around with the rules story since we talked about Fae and everything. I've kind of gone back to that one with my story with the Fae in the university city, and I was just reading like the very, very original draft when it's just supposed to be the short story of a girl interacting with the Fae and following their rules and such, and before it even had like an actual plot. And thinking that I might want to go back to those roots for that story.
Mm-hmm. So I guess that's just like the focus right now then.
Yeah, at the moment.
All right. I guess after checking in with Marie-Soleil, let's now check in with Brooke, actually, because she debuted with us at the start of season 3, actually, with what were we talking about that time? I think just like
Good question.
Oh my god, I'm not doing well as a guild master right now.
He used the title. It's confirmed.
Okay, so episode 25 was when Brooke debuted with us. It was we were talking about writing styles and accommodations in the, I guess, latter half of the conversation, but within like the first 15-20 minutes we were just talking about Brooke. So let's check in with her.
Yeah. As y'all know, recently I've just been working a lot on my Zayla story, and I think since I first developed it in the first year of university, I've come to terms with like how I want the story to play out, and I'm thinking it's going to be a duology. And I just really okay, well, first of all, I've had to I had to like remind myself constantly these days that this isn't something that I plan to do in the future. This is something I'm aiming for like right now. And this isn't, I want to publish something. I want to be an author one day. It's like, I can do that right now. So I've been working hard to get myself into that mindset. Like, this is something I can do right now, work on right now. And I have been working on it, but I only have like 4 chapters. Quite like Gabe, actually. I do have like a general month goal, and it's kind of funny actually when he mentioned that he's like, I want 10 chapters done by the end of June. I'm like, oh fuck, that's like really similar to me. But I think it was 15 chapters. And part of my problem with writing, even though like I have so much inspiration for Zayla's story and knowing that it's going to be duology and developing the world and the characters, is I have a second duology idea going at the back burner of my mind constantly. So it's like I have these 2 stories that are complete opposites of each other, by the way.
Is it related to Zayla in any way?
No, it's completely different. So you know how like Zayla is kind of like sci-fi dystopian YA kind of thing?
Yeah, from what I know of the little bits that you've been sharing with us on and off podcast, yeah.
Yeah. The other story that I've been thinking about is like when did I set it? Kind of like 1940s-ish era, I feel like, but different world and more almost fantasy utopian setting. So like literally opposites of each other, and it's it's very in my head, both of these stories going at the same time. But yeah, I would love to do both of them. I think I'm seriously committed to both of these duology ideas, but I'm focusing most on Zayla and just getting the first book out of my head and onto paper. Otherwise, I don't do much else.
Yeah, especially because like you, like as we've found out, again, either on or off podcast, I can't really remember, but just you don't write in order.
No.
Which
I don't.
Which like I guess that's its own conversation, but I guess just me bringing that up, it's like, holy hell, that must be difficult trying to like piece everything together, because like I understand that like churning out multiple chapters out of order is like it can probably be efficient, but then like piecing it all in order is like, oh fuck, what do I do?
Precisely. Very like I can think of them and I know generally where they go, but then it's like, how do I get from this chapter that I created before to this chapter that's somewhere in the middle?
Yeah.
And make sure that they all make sense. And that's something I found while I was doing all like the chapters that I wrote, I put into workshop, right? And people were asking about like other things, like, well, how did they get here? What's the scenery like? And stuff like that. I'm like, oh, that's going to be described earlier or something.
Mm-hmm.
And something when I was rewriting parts of my chapters recently, I noticed that I was ending up having to change a lot because I realized it sounds like exposition, and I'll have to put those details into earlier chapters to establish them instead of just having all this like dumping in the middle of these chapters. So quite a bit of the content that I had in those chapters in those early drafts is getting completely deleted because it's like this can be earlier in the story. I don't need it here, and having it here makes it seem like I didn't plan anything in advance.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been.
Yeah, I guess it's just been like you have your big project in mind, but now it's just kind of like controlling all of your ideas, I guess.
Stressed about like my first chapter because it's like I just need to start writing in order, so I really need to get this first chapter out so I know where I'm starting my story, and I can go from there, you know?
Fair enough. All right, that was checking in with Brooke, and for I guess this pretty extensive check-in, as it's kind of been more evident to me. Let's check in with Tyler, who introduced himself in, I think, episode 33 when we were talking about songwriting. The first, give or take, 25 minutes was talking about Tyler, and in the introduction, he is not just a creative writer, he's also a musician and all this other creative things. So creative goal wise, let's see what's kind of been happening.
What's happening is it's hot out and I work every morning and I haven't had time to do too much creative. But I did double my word count in my first short story yesterday, so that was nice. Creative goals, let's see. Creative writing wise, I am working on the first short story in my mythic cosmos. Working title is nothing except new Word document number 2. I'm editing one of the other writers in my setting. She's been working a lot harder than me because she has not been working regularly. So she's had plenty of time to write, and I've had plenty of time to read her things. Planning out Dungeons and Dragons stories, but I'm not going to say anything about that because one of my players is in the call. And I want a song out by the end of June here, is the hope. So lots of things on the go.
Nice. Exciting. So with, I think all of us kind of restating our goals and I guess kind of updating on what we've already said, those I think were just our goals. And I think ultimately when it comes to our goals, it is more or less inspired, like driven by our creative vision, I think. And to not be too extensive on our creative vision, which can, be summed up in a sentence or to sum up in like paragraphs worth. I think when we're talking about creative vision, that's ultimately like the crux for tonight. And when I say creative vision, I mean just like how you as a creative person see things. Like how do you envision things and how do you more or less develop your setting, your world building, your your characters. We've touched on similar things like this when we were talking about writing style, but writing style is a more technical approach to it. So just, how do we approach, the technical aspect of writing? So how do we lay out em dashes, ellipses, paragraphs, all that stuff? How do we make the story, or how do we type out or write out the story? But when it comes to vision, it's more or less just creating using our head first, really. And that's, again, I think can be summed up in either a sentence or a few lines. And to quickly sum up mine, my creative vision has always been focus. Like I've always tried to remain as focused as possible when it comes to things that I create. For Xeno, it is things that are either relevant to the plot or at least relevant to this first book. I have admittingly kind of branched out and expanded the world overall, but I haven't started writing stories in another continent yet. I haven't really started populating the oceans with different fish and whatnot. Like that isn't the goal. And I think more or less if I started building other aspects of this world and really suddenly falling for it, like really engaging with it, then I'll lose focus for the story, which I've done plenty of so far, and I can't keep doing that. So I guess, yeah, as a creative, like my creative vision is more or less, or is primarily on focus, and it's just to make sure that I am achieving like the things that I can when I can and not try to deviate too often. Let's check in with, or let's go with Gabe's. What is his goal, or what is his vision, I guess, when it comes to creating?
That's a good question. I've been sort of thinking about this a lot lately because, I mean, because Lemonheart it's not going to be a series. I have considered a sequel, but it's not something that I'm like planning on or anything. But so there's some aspects of world building that I'm working on and that I'm trying to like think about, but I guess my main goal with writing Lemonheart is like trying to get across sort of like, because it's an apocalyptic story and like goes without saying that writing an apocalypse story right now is like going to come from somewhere that's not like just completely unfounded in reality, right? If that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. Like, but so I guess a big thing for me with writing Lemonheart is like trying to write a story that is that has balance, I guess. Balance is like if it's a one word thing, like balance, because I'm trying to write a story that's like that has like the sort of bad shit chaotic nature that its premise would imply, and that like the world sort of has, and the way the characters are sort of have, and things are just kind of weird because like that's who I am as a person, that's how I write, and that's like I just like writing like that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I have I have an idea about like sort of what I think about like what a lot of fiction, apocalyptic fiction, is like about. And I guess my goal with Lemonheart is to try to like not be chill with a lot of it. The big thing for me, and this is the reason why I focus so much on like world building for the various faction groups, and like on what Dune specifically is doing and what characters like motivations are, because like I think a lot of like post-apocalyptic fiction is about this idea of like, not about, but it all has like the common trope of like a raider in it, and like the idea, the I don't know if it's Thomas Hobbes or a different philosopher, but like the idea that like if you take away authority and if you take away law and order, then people will just be like crazy fucked up animals.
Yeah. So Gabe, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I guess
am I going on a tangent? Sorry.
No, it's not that. I'm just trying to, like, for me personally, like what I was gonna say is that like from the sounds of it, your vision more or less is about balance.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's from what I'm hearing, and you know, correct me where I'm wrong, but you have like a whole bunch of ideas, but suddenly leaning too far into them means, oh my God, I'm going on a tangent, and then leaning not far enough into them means, okay, suddenly my world feels shallow, or suddenly all of my world building and all that stuff. Like, and this is just world building, right? Like when you have characters,
it's world building, and it's also like it's like, yeah, it's world building, and it's also just like a general opinion that I have about like what would happen in these situations.
Yeah, so I guess more or less it's just more or less the vision, I guess, right now with Lemonheart, and I think maybe for future projects is balance, just trying to balance like leaning too much or leaning too little into something.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. I guess then let's check in with Marie-Soleil about her creative vision, I guess. So, you know, like we had said, we were talking about creative goals and whatnot, but when it comes to like the central idea or like the central thing that you were trying to work on with these goals, what would that be? When we're talking, or like when I'm talking creative vision, because this is probably not the way other people to be talking about it, but like what is the underlying factor that like helps you reach or work towards your creative writing goals? What's the vision there?
So when I'm writing, when I come up with an idea or a story, like I get the story prompt or something that sparks what the idea is. I start with the concept, and can be a very broad concept. It can be a very narrow concept. And then I need the world this concept would fit in. And then once I have the world, I need the characters. And then from the characters, I can start with the scenes and actually have like a plot. Like, what would this character's plot be in this world? Does that answer the question?
Yes, I think like a single.
If I'm going in the right direction.
Yeah, no.
What the question is asking.
Well, the word that kind of popped up into my head when you were speaking is for some reason patience. Like you like to take your time with one thing at a time and then move into another thing once you've had the first thing settled. So with the world built, then you work onto the characters. Then with your characters, then the plot. Is that kind of where like you were thinking?
Yeah.
Like does it kind of Yeah? Okay.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like building a pyramid. You got to start with a foundation and then every like layer and then when you get to the top of it, you've got your story.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I say patience, because there are writers out there, and you know, certainly some within this group that like just kind of start building like whatever.
Yeah.
Which isn't a bad thing. Like, I don't say that with any kind of negative connotation, but writers that I'm familiar with and creative people in general like to just start going with ideas. They don't really account for like starting with like the world itself and then the characters and then the plot. It's more just like, I have a plot, here are the characters, there's the world, oh, here's more characters. It's kind of hard to keep up with sometimes, and the reason why I say patience is the kind of driving goal behind your creative visions, because it seems like taking time developing one thing is pretty important, which it is, right?
Yes, I really like that's something I focus on, because sometimes I'll write a scene and then I'll do something with a character and I'm like, wait, no, this character wouldn't do this. This goes against the character's values or their beliefs or something. They wouldn't say this, they wouldn't do that. And then I have to rework the entire scene because then it just wouldn't fit into their character.
Yeah, so it's not trying to meet word counts or anything. It's really being happy with what you're doing before meeting like technical goals, right? Like, some people try to meet word counts and whatnot, but there are some people, which you may be a part of, maybe you might not be, but like, I'm aware that like some people want to be happy with their scenes in general. It doesn't matter how many words or like how far the plot is going. Like, if this scene works, then it works, and go from there.
Yeah. But I like having my roots set in before I go further, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah,
would this character fit into this world? Would this happen in this world? Like, how would this play out in the setting that I've created?
Yeah, so more or less, like, on top of patience, it's also just making sure that you're ready each and every time you're prepared. Okay, so I guess like how we were talking about creative vision, what I kind of mean is like, what are like one word that kind of describes it? So there's focus, balance, preparation, patience, and that's just with three of us so far. Brooke, how about you? So again, when it comes to creative vision, like the underlying thing that drives your goal, like your creative writing goals, are you aware of yours?
I don't know. It feels like the opposite of yours, where you have to focus and do the things. I feel like I just dive in, like I'm delving into the world and everything. And because how my inspirations come to me is just like a character or a scene or a very vague vibe will just manifest itself into my mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a one page file folder sitting in a room, and I go and sit in that room with the one page file folder, and I open it and I look at those things and I go, all right, what else? And then I create many files to go with that single page file folder. And I write sometimes as I do that.
I don't know what like, I guess if we're doing like the whole one word kind of summarizing everything is, I don't know if one word kind of came to mind, but I know what you're talking about. It's just going.
Yeah.
Which I guess that's it. Just going. Which just going. Like, I understand that. Like, it's sometimes like preparation and research certainly does take a while, but if you just start going, then like you can decide plot, characters, stuff as you're doing it, which I guess in a way kind of helps keep you consistent. I think, like, if you're constantly thinking of like ideas on the spot and not just going on it with, not just having research to back it up, at least like it keeps you engaged to some degree.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that's what it's like for you. I'm just kind of, imagining a hypothetical.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, the word that comes to my mind is spiraling. Yeah.
Slippery sloping. But it's not a slippery.
Spiral.
It's not a. Yeah, I think it's more spiraling.
It's not like it's not a negative slippery slope kind of thing.
No.
It's just spiraling. Like the thing is there, and then I just dive. I go in, dive. You know.
So it could just be diving. Maybe that's the one word, diving.
I want to say spiraling because that's fun.
Spiraling is fun. Okay, fine. Okay, so yeah, Brooke's creative vision spiraling.
Spiraling. Perfect.
All right. Just a quick check-in. Actually, is this making sense? Like, how I frame the question? Is this like coming across clearly to everybody, or
No.
like have I lost people? No, it doesn't make any sense, Brooke.
I follow.
It sounded kind of more like you wanted to say like creative process or inspiration kind of thing. When I'm thinking vision is when I'm already thinking of like how we put forth the ideas and whatnot. But I still get your gist. It's fine.
It's fair enough. I think, yeah, we've talked about like it's so interchangeable, creative process and I guess creative vision, but I guess that's just how I've framed creative vision. If there are any professionals who are listening, please tell me if I'm wrong. I don't know any better. But yeah, I guess finally let's just check in with Tyler about his creative vision. So, you know, like we'd been talking about, if there was like a single word or something that was driving your creative writing goals or your creative goals in general, what would it be?
See, it's hard to pin it down in one word. My style is very structured. And as Marie-Soleil was saying, she thinks of it as a pyramid. You got to have your foundation up, then you build the characters, then you build the plot, et cetera, so that way it all sticks together. And that's typically how I follow. I wasn't even writing a story before I worked on the setting. I focus on setting first and then make everything fit inside it. But creative vision wise, how I come up with the setting is very loose as opposed to my foundation. And I haven't thought of a word specifically to deal with this, but I know I've spoken with you about it, Dean, on at least one occasion, which was how I'll often first generate an idea. And it's by one scene. And this is something I've talked to a few writers in my life about. It's when you start writing a book or something like that, you have this one scene in your head that is kind of what you're working towards. That first initial vision when you start thinking of the characters, whether it be a climax or just one action scene, something that really spawned the rest of the idea. And whether you're sticking with that initial scene that popped into your head or you've diverted from it, I keep it in my mind every time I'm writing. Even if I've gone away from it, it's good to know that when I think of this scene, when I play it out in my head, it still elicits the feeling. And that feeling is what I go for in all of the writing around one setting. And as long as it fits that initial vision, even if I never write out that initial scene, that's more than fine. But as long as everything is tangentially related and that I still elicit that feeling that I get when I think of it, that's my creative vision, as best summed up as I can make it.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. I think then, like if I had to put a single word to it, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's just, I think more or less it's just the word scene, like just the scene.
You're making me think of my scene face. Stop, please.
I'm sorry,
my hair was so bad.
Okay, well, I don't mean it like that, but I also will not bring it up again. But basically what I mean is that like it's more or less just like, you know, starting with an idea in your head, but specifically for you it is just a moment in time in this narrative that just lingers with you and sticks with you, right?
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I've had a few of them from dreams that then spawn into the greater concept, so I don't know. My hallucinating unconsciousness does help.
All right. I think, like, for me, to touch on dreams really quick, it's it's more or less the same thing. Like, I've never written scenes based on dreams, but like there are just some moments where it's like I understand the emotion behind it, and I understand like, holy hell, there's some kind of underlying batshit in this, or there's some kind of underlying thing within this batshit that I could use for a scene or something. But yeah, I guess that was touching on creative vision, which was again kind of worded pretty weirdly, but more or less some of the key words that we had coming out of this discussion was focus, balance, preparation, spiraling. How could I forget? Scene. Oh my god, I brought it up again. And I think that's
You're gonna
it.
make me start posting some of my old pictures now.
I'm not telling you to do anything.
Do it.
You've
Oh my
already
God.
stalked my Facebook, darling. You know what I used to look like.
Yeah, but they don't.
I'm not gonna stop you. Just that's at your own thing. I didn't prompt you to do anything. I'm still not prompting you to. But yeah, so again, 5 words, 5 different creative people. I think accounting for our vision in mind and accounting for our goals specifically, let's now just start talking about what it means to honor that. And by honor that, I mean obviously just when we are going into the industry, or when we're going with like just friends in general, or when we're talking about our crazy wacky ideas, just how true to it can we be, and how true to it can that be for us as creative people. Specifically, to kind of first go into our topic list, I noted it down who we would/wouldn't work with. To kind of explain myself a little bit to everyone here. What I mean by that is just when we we are aware of how we are as creative people. We are aware of like how we like to do things, how we like to progress the plot along as a writer, how we like to develop worlds and all that. We are sure to an extent, because obviously it changes and whatnot, to pose an open question and anyone can answer. Has that vision ever been conflicting with someone else's?
Well, I should say that my current setting is an open universe. I've got one other writing friend of mine who is working in it at current, and Marie-Soleil does have some ideas as well. And there have been a few conflictions. I'm acting kind of as curator of the setting, in that I have all the source documents, and I have to read every story, and we have to keep it within fit. As such, I do kind of reserve that right, as this setting is my brainchild. However, when we get on drunk Discord calls and discuss and hash out bits of setting, I've never found us in any great conflict as of yet. We're usually pretty smooth working together so far.
Marie-Soleil, since you're working with Tyler, I guess, on this open world, do you want to kind of expand on that?
I agree with what he's saying. With his open world, it is a very wide world, and there's a lot you can work with because it takes references from both Greek and European lore. We've got everything from Hercules to the Knights of the Round Table, and there's a lot of stuff that each writer can play with
without stepping on each other's toes, really.
Yes.
Like, yeah, we can use similar characters, but in the end, as long as it's okay with the original author of the character, everyone's been pretty hunky-dory so far. And I wouldn't mind including more people in this setting either, if I generate interest. The one person I would never work with, though, because I see that's like on the little topic list today, and this is just personal bias, but fuck Stephen King. That's it.
All right, I guess I didn't exactly plan on burning specific bridges, but all right.
I will die on that bridge while I burn it.
All right. Well, there's
one thing with Tyler's world, though, whereas knowing that I was going to use a not a specific character, but a type of character, like because we've got different.
You can say races or factions. That would probably work.
Factions. I think factions works best. Different factions. And the other writer that's working on this universe was referring to the same faction that I wanted to use in my story, but in mine they're more of a minor character than hers.
Right.
And Tyler made sure to let me know that she was building a lot more into their backstories and their culture, so that when I put them into my story, they didn't go against the culture she had already created for them.
Interesting. I guess then, like, it like that perspective of like a more open-ended universe, that is certainly one like contributor to this conversation. Like, you know, when it comes to more open-ended universes like Tyler's, you have things to work with. However, you ultimately decide the narrative for yourself. You know, obviously checking in here and there by Tyler, but I think there is an opposite to that too, and that is specifically, I want to say like closed stories, but I think what I mean by that is just personal plot narratives, like our own stories, really. Like, when it comes to like who we wouldn't work with, to elaborate on that further is, I think specifically when we're talking about our stories and when we're trying to get criticism for it, there are probably certain exceptions. There's probably people that we look forward to when it comes to these things. And I say when I say who wouldn't work with, like that can kind of get into criticism, I guess. And we had talked about criticism before in a previous episode, but I guess let's kind of elaborate more on that. And I guess to start, I think my creative vision has always been very open. I'd like to say that it's like, despite me saying that I like to be very focused whenever I'm doing it, I'm very open to receiving new ideas and ways to do things about certain plot beats, characters, world, like aspects of Xeno's world building and whatnot. Like I tell myself that, but in reality, it's kind of choosy. I think like I certainly I certainly am welcoming of a lot of different comments, but the ones that ultimately make it into the narrative are the ones that, you know, I guess relating to the subject, I either work with it or I don't. And I think that's a nice contrast, because with an open-ended universe, it is still ultimately it's like they give you the structure to the story, or the structure to like the world, but they don't tell you how to how to tell your story. But when it comes to a more closed-ended narrative like mine, so everything had been kind of built up for me and I'm the only one working on it, it's probably a bit more different who you would and wouldn't work with, right? So I think, is that making sense?
Yeah, I get you, because like with ours, we are sharing. We're hand in hand doing different stories at the same time. Whereas with yours, it's you're holding the story, and every once in a while, someone pokes a finger in there and wiggles it around, and you can decide if you like how they're stirring the pot or not.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, it's because I'm at the helm of this story, or because I'm at the one at the helm of Xeno. Like, criticism and comments are like supposed to be helping the story. Like, I never want anyone to suddenly start writing it for me. But I think, yeah, that's kind of where I was touching base with. Let's talk to Gabe and Brooke about that, actually, because Zayla and Lemonheart, within their own rights, have always been pitched as specific plot-driven stories. You've never just been talking solely about the world and telling us, like, as a friend group, like, hey, write whatever story you want or something like that. It's more just been like, you have a plot in mind. How does stuff like criticism and commentary on that kind of influence it, and how is it either progress the story or not? I'm not calling on a
Should I go or
specific.
should
I'm
I-
not calling on a specific person. Someone should start.
Gabe, you can go.
Okay. I mean, it's basically the same thing that you were saying. Like criticism is a weird thing because like there will be times where like I'll put something out there and like I'll get criticisms for it, and like whether or not like I'll actually go back and change it, or it sort of depends on like what the criticism is, or like I don't know how to phrase it. It's really a moment to moment thing. There's no real like way to identify what is like a criticism, what would be a criticism that I agree with. It's sort of just like it kind of happens. Like this happened a lot during when I started writing Lemon Heart, when we were in the creative workshop, where I would workshop the story a lot and I would get a lot of criticisms back. And like some of those criticisms ended up influencing how I went on to write the story. And then a lot of them I don't really remember because they didn't really factor in, but I listened to them and I have them written them down somewhere, but I don't really remember them because they either wasn't like I didn't really understand what they were saying, or B, they don't really apply to where the story is at anymore. So
Yeah, it's more or less just what I had been saying. So there are some comments that help your narrative, some that don't.
there's some comments that a big thing that happens with criticism in a creative workshop class when you're workshopping a long-term story and you're workshopping multiple chapters, something that can accidentally happen a lot, and like it's nobody's fault. So but like it happens a lot is where like you'll put something in and it'll be a chapter of something and it'll naturally not resolve everything by the end of it, and we'll have elements of it that like may or may not be like representative of the entire story.
Mm-hmm.
So when you workshop something, like you might get a criticism of a very small part of the story, but the criticism will be like you should not do this for the rest of the story, and like obviously you take the criticism naturally, but in your head you're thinking like I wasn't planning on it. But
right. Do you have an example of it going, I don't want to say negatively, but one where it ultimately didn't benefit your story? Because to quickly touch on one that did benefit my story, it was the role of Juno, which for those who have read for the story, Juno is a very small character ultimately in the beginning half of Zeno's narrative. She was pretty much always supposed to have a very small role in the narrative, but I think through criticism and commentary, not just from classmates, but from you guys as friends, like it really helped like make sense that like her role was like almost like atom size compared to the thing. Like I certainly could have made it a little bit bigger, like not suddenly where she is like the deuteragonist or something, but just expand on her story a little bit. So it's that kind of it's when things like just giving character like giving a minor character more character in general that makes it, that means like criticism, oh shit, it's actually pretty good. Like it's actually beneficial. I think that's, or like it helps, like it aligns with your vision. That's what I'm trying to say. Right. Like it doesn't go too far off from what you originally had planned. Right.
yeah.
So yeah, did you have an example of like it going not according to your vision?
I'm trying to think. I have an example of like I can think of a one that has affected my vision, but I can't. I'm pulling up my notes right now because I'm trying to remember one time where I got a criticism that like I felt really disagreed with my ideas, but the I think the one that like has influenced the way that I'm writing Lemonheart the most, and I don't remember who said this unfortunately, but I was writing I workshopped a chapter for Lemonheart that was very like action heavy, and like I hadn't written a lot of action in anything that I'd written before this, so like it was very I didn't want to like overdo it with like gory details and like super visceral shit because I didn't want to sound like a sociopath, and I didn't want to like go too in depth about it. But like the unanimous criticism that I got was that I should not do that and that I should be as visceral as possible. So like ever since then I've been writing Lemonheart as a lot like every time a character dies like they fucking die. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And like I've made a lot of the action a lot more like detailed almost because another big thing was like it was like a military person, but like they were the way it was described, it sounded like they were taken down like a total wimp. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to go back and like course correct that to like make it feel more realistic, and then that's also affected like how I write that sort of thing.
Yeah. So I guess like while it wasn't initially part of your vision for Lemonheart, it ultimately helped like progress it nonetheless.
It helped me get over an insecurity I had over like over writing violence, because I wasn't like super comfortable writing a super violent sequence in Lemonheart. Just because I was just like I don't want this to like I want this to be weird, but I don't want this to like make people uncomfortable as they're reading it. Mm-hmm. But then the response that I got was like overwhelmingly, no, do that. Do make us cringe a little bit by how fucking violent this is. Like, not like, and then I was like, oh, well, shit. All right. I'll make it more violent.
To be honest, with all the love in the world to these creative writing classes, we all have like it's taught me coming out of these classes that we all have an inner bloodlust. And I think that's concerning.
Hey man, art is how people get out like ugly thoughts and shit.
I know, but like I know in that kind of environment, and this is just kind of going off, and I'm sorry to anyone who's listening from those classes, but just like, oh man, I hear of like so many violent stories, and I'm like, holy shit, who knew we've got that in us? Yeah, I think I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent. Brooke, let's check in with you because I know you wanted to comment too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like the same thing with Gabe. It's like context matters a lot with our stories because of the whole it's a book thing, and with workshops you can only bring in at maximum a chapter. And there was a lot that I took in stride when I first brought in my Zayla pieces, because like a lot of them were just like the usual corrections that I was fine with, like describe this area more, like the ballroom that I was describing. They'd be like, you need this or this. I'm like, okay, that's fine. But sometimes, like what pops into my head was the first time I brought in Zayla was the very first chapter that I've written, which was the infiltration scene, and I had her get kicked down by the guard, right? And she couldn't get herself to even think about killing him, and it was Matthias who had to go and kill the guard to save her. And people immediately jumped on that and be like, you need to have her kill someone. And I'm like, I'm going to do that a lot later in the story. That's kind of part of her arc, is that she has to come to terms with actually killing people for the revolution. Mm-hmm. But with these creative workshops, everyone just like wants things like right away. And it's like, I can't have her do that. And people were like upset with me that she wanted to kill her sister at one point. But it's like, it's just, one of those rushes of emotions. Obviously, she's not going to kill her sister, but it was one of those things that I wanted to have in the story. But everyone was telling me it was uncharacteristic and weird. It's like, you haven't read any of the story of her. How do you know it's uncharacteristic? I'm not going to change my character because of this tiny scene that you saw of her and saying that she would do that. You don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like part of the problem I've always had with like showing people stuff and then they like ask questions, because it's like they don't know it the way that you do. Like I know everything about my characters and the story and what's happening very intimately, and I got to remember that they don't know everything that I know.
Right.
So when they pick apart scenes, it's like you don't know exactly what's happened before this or what's going to happen after or why they're doing this thing that they're doing right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially if you're just introducing a character too. Like, bear in mind, I haven't read your first chapter or any material from Zayla really, but like if you were to tell me that like this is the first chapter, or like this is a chapter somewhere along like, you know, somewhere along like the critical moments of this character's development, I think context is important to keep in mind when you're doing these things, because you're right. Like if you're workshopping, you know, I guess this is just on workshop, but like if you're just workshopping like a small section of your story of like like a bigger narrative in general, there are some things that like ultimately you kind of go in there expecting, like you kind of want people to comment on you want people to comment on the technical aspects, you want people to like point out characteristics and stuff that you probably didn't see beforehand. But I think what I definitely agree with you is that it's important also to understand the context of the story and just where along the plot it is, because I've been also told that like, hey, why isn't Porter doing this? It's kind of like undefining for her character. And I also had the kind of same reaction in the back of my head. Bitch, you don't fucking know her.
Fuck, what was I about to say? Shit. Yeah, it's like I wanted criticism more on like the technical aspects. Like a lot of the time I wanted the most feedback on like dialogue and character interactions, not specifically what the characters themselves and how they felt. It's like I just want to know if this conversation feels good. Okay, that's it. Don't fuck with me.
Yeah. I think, yeah, you know what? Let's talk. I know I know on our topic list we've had inspirations and plagiarism as our next kind of segue, but I think talking about context is probably a more interesting conversation, not just for closed narratives like, you know, Xeno, Lemonheart, and Zayla, but just open stories in general, probably with like Tyler's. Like, it's important to consider context, and it's often something that like when you're talking about creative vision, like you obviously have your own thing in mind. Like you as a writer or you as a creative know how your character behaves. You've spent like how long trying to portray that as best you can in a chapter or in like a series of chapters and whatnot. And through creative writing workshops, as one example, you kind of go in wanting something out of that. Like you kind of want people to reflect on dialogue, like Brooke had said, or something relating to like the world building and stuff. And it's that kind of context that I think is important when you're doing, or like that kind of context is important in general, because if you're submitting in chapters of a longer narrative, you have to consider the context, because otherwise, like, you can't just solely judge a character based on one thing, right? It might be a pivotal chapter, but there is still a longer story at play here, right? And because also Gabe is doing Lemonheart, let's touch on him when it comes to context, actually.
For which?
For Lemonheart. Just because that's the one.
In what context?
Like, when it comes to, like, what Brooke and I had been talking about, so like getting criticism and workshopping chapters out of context and kind of expecting or kind of wanting one thing but getting other things from the class.
Yeah, I did end up looking through my notes for my older workshops, and I found a couple things that were like, I remember thinking like at the time, like there was one where I don't know which chapter it was, but the note that it was, I mean, I do know it was like the second chapter, I think. And the big note I got was like that Dune as a character needs to have his motivations like evolve beyond the haha funny porn man, violent porn addict premise.
Yeah.
And I do remember thinking at the time I was like, okay, so I gotta get to that quicker. But at the same time I was like, dude, I'm fucking getting to it. It's chapter 2.
Yeah.
I'm fucking getting there.
Yeah. Actually, I'll save my thought for after.
No. You go ahead. I don't know. I don't know truly what else to say.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, this isn't just us kind of venting our feelings about the creative writing workshop, but it is kind of something worth considering. When you're in an environment when you're sharing stories and you're trying to obviously gain criticism get comments and criticism for the thing that you're like workshopping, I guess, in a way, or like the thing that you're just trying to share, like an idea or whatever, like it's probably important to like be upfront with your context, because like it's kind of confusing when you kind of get told that like, hey, your character here seems a little bit underdeveloped, and you just look at them like, bruh, I'm working on it, right? Like it's more or less just something. I don't know if you guys find it annoying, but I
don't find it annoying. I think it's a part of the workshop process.
Yeah, and you kind of like understand that too, right? Like, you're taking something out of context and looking for one specific thing.
I think it's necessary too. I mean, okay, here's the thing. I'm gonna do a complete 180 on what I was just saying, but I think there is a necessity to it as well, because like, as much as I was like, I definitely had the plans to like have Dune as a character, like eventually to have more on his mind than angry masturbation. Like I was like relatively content with just leaving the story there for like a little bit before devolving, but I think I don't know. I think like, okay, if you're in a workshop and like you're workshopping a chapter or something, and like someone says character A needs more motivation, or they need more development, or they need to nut up, or they need to like nut up is a completely innocent word. Don't chortle.
Nut up or shut up.
Nut up or shut up. Yeah.
I think like if it's something, if they give you a criticism that you agree with, or like, but not that you agree with because like but like a criticism that you're like, yeah, dude, I'm getting to it. I think, I don't know. This might just be a me thing. This might just be completely for me, but like I think it does give it like a little bit, like a little extra oomph in the back of my mind, that I'm like, oh man, I should get on that. I should like not that I'm like I haven't done that yet, but it's just like a little extra reminder, or just a little extra like motivation to do the thing in your story that you're planning on, or that you're working on, or you're working towards. Just like a little extra kick.
That is a fair point, I guess. Like something that is considered out of context could help build better context, I think.
Yeah, like if someone reads like a chapter of a story and they're like, this character is underdeveloped, and you're thinking like, if they get developed later on, then as a writer you can either take from that, I feel like you can take from that whatever you want to take from that, but I think a healthy way, I think a decent way to look at it, or how I look at it, I don't know if it's a healthy way, because I'm not a role model, but like I think a more optimistic way, I guess, to look at it is like okay, so this person agrees with me on the direction that I want to take the story to go, so the direction that I'm going is the right direction because people think that the story should go in that direction,
right?
And then it like reaffirms what you're already doing.
Fair enough. All right, good point. Marie-Soleil, since you were also part of our workshops, do you have anything to add on to that when considering context? Because like so I don't remember many of the pieces you considered, but I think most of them were very like contained, I think.
They were, yep. It really bothered me when people would they'd focus on a minor, like what they considered a minor detail, and be like, why is this included? Because they never brought it up in the class in the discussion, so I couldn't explain why I included that detail, but they'd write it down on their copy of my story, and it bothered me because so there's one of the stories I brought in was a chapter from a zombie apocalypse story that I was writing. And I'm still working on it. It's just backburnered. But there's a group of high school students that are trying to get home from a school trip during the zombie apocalypse. And at one point, there are two girls in the group. One girl asks the other girl for a tampon. And somebody was like, why did you include this in the story? And it's like, because these are 16-year-old girls, and it's important to them as 16-year-old girls that they're running out of period supplies, and that's going to be a necessary thing that they need to get. Or so they have to come up with a way to figure out a way to get around that. And to me, writing the story, it was important to put that in there and important in the future to bring that up again. But to this person who just read 2 pages out of the story, they're like, you don't need to include that. This is unimportant. Pissed me off. It's the one that came to mind right now because I was going through my I'm trying to go through I'm a pack rat. I'm trying to go through all of my stuff, and I found the copies of that story the other day. But all over again.
Right.
I remember liking that story. That was fun.
Yeah.
So I remember liking that story. And one of the girls mentioned sushi, and I was like, oh, I want sushi right now.
Yes. I also had another scene in that same storyline where they end up in a mall and they go to a hair salon and wash their hair. And yeah, they're washing their hair with cold water because there's no heat. But it's the first time they've washed their hair in a month.
Oh, yeah, that'd be nice.
I think when you're taking a story, when you're considering a story that is, or when you're considering excerpts, I guess, out of context, there are some things that still kind of linger with you in the back of your head when you're receiving these comments, because again, to kind of go back to the thing of you go into these workshops, whether you're open about it or not, with some kind of with the context of the full story in your head, right? You're more or less just, I say a lot of specific words in these podcasts now that I'm very self-aware of it, but just you kind of account for the context that you've been working potentially years on. You can't just spend a whole page just expositing everything needed for everyone to read the story. That's not how that works. Which has been, as I guess we've been kind of going through, it's through stuff like creative writing workshops that has been a good and bad thing, which considering context is, I guess, a fairly neutral thing that just kind of depends. If it's something that ultimately benefits your story, that's great, but if it doesn't, then it's, at worst, it just sticks with you because it just made you angry.
No, wait. Grinds my gears actually is when they critique something, they'll say this doesn't work, but they won't give you an alternative. I remember people bringing up, for some reason, the technology that I was using, they're like, I don't like this, but they gave no reason why or what else I could do instead. They just I don't like it. I don't like these terms. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Then what do you want me to do?
I 100% agree. Again, just to reiterate, this is not the session. This is not the recording podcast where we just start venting our feelings about the episode, about the creative writing classes that we've been in. No, but I do agree, 100%. As someone who is really wanting to make sure that I am doing this thing right, especially because I've gone on podcasts before and saying this, this story means a lot, and I'm hoping that it means a lot. Being told nothing when you're trying to be specific about something is dude, you can tell me that a character's motivations are flawed or something, but just, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah.
It's that, yeah, that's a peeve of mine too, I guess.
Or if you were asking about feedback on one part of it, you're asking feedback for your sentence structure or your grammar or how the conversation flows. And then when you get them back and there's nothing about those specific things and just criticism on something else.
Yeah, because like as a writer, you recognize that is like something you need to work on. Right? Like that's something that, like, you know, to tie it back to creative vision, like that is something that is ultimately stopping you from progressing. It is this one little thing that really people that understand where you're coming from would best help with. Like, I say that because no one is going to, like, within your own circle of friends, there are only really so many of them that kind of understand how storytelling works. And I guess with, you know, us being a creative writing group chat, whenever we're talking about like sharing stories and stuff, we understand. But in an environment like a creative writing workshop class, or just like, I'd imagine an editing session in general between a editor and a author, it's important to like have your your questions and stuff answered as much as possible, because if it's just gonna bug the shit out of you if it's not.
Yeah. Even a quick note, like, I didn't notice anything wrong with whatever you're asking about. Even just like someone saying that's helpful.
Yeah, like wording your things differently. Like I've been checking in with you guys about clarification for almost every single podcast session, because I don't know if I'm making any sense. And like, I would hope that it makes sense, because obviously we are trying to talk about something. The same vein goes for when you're trying to write, because if you are writing something that you feel doesn't make sense and no one elaborates on and no one touches on it, then it's just going to be like, I guess to like touch on what Brooke was saying, it spirals. It negatively spirals in a really, really bad direction, because then you're like, well, what the fuck? What do I do?
So, funny that we're talking about critiquing. Dean, how was my critiquing?
Very thorough.
That's what I like to hear.
Yeah. So, again, to kind of tie it back into creative vision, I guess, like we as writers understand where we are going with our work piece, or like with our stories and stuff, like context and criticism. That is something ultimately that we have kind of had control over to a degree, like as unpublished writers who are freely sharing their stories on an open platform such as this. I obviously can't speak for everybody, but I am comfortable sharing these stories. I think some of my main concerns, though, and kind of touching on something that like going into the next phase of our discussion, is when suddenly you don't have control of that, and suddenly someone else is in charge of like adapting your vision. So what we're going to be talking about now is the good and bad of adaptations. Specifically, it's such a broad thing when I say adaptations, because obviously you could adapt a story in numerous different ways nowadays. There are traditional book stories, there are movies, there's TV shows, video games. There's so many different ways to tell a story nowadays. And when it comes to how we envision things as writers, like, again, I'll just speak for myself. Like, I am worried when it comes to like future adaptations of this, because like, and you know, maybe this is just me being like a young writer with like ambitions of like, you know, getting my book published and it becoming a movie or something. But like, really, when it comes to adaptations, my main worry is suddenly losing control of something that I once had a lot of, which I know carries a lot of negative connotation, but there is, I think I'm justified in that, because I've seen plenty of my favorite stories just get butchered in adaptations. There are a few exceptions, but overall there is just conflicting vision, I guess, when you are trying to adapt something, anything really. You know, we had talked on Marie-Soleil's debut episode actually about book adaptations and how sometimes, you know, like justifiably not every book will be able to translate well onto screen. However, it's not capturing that magic of the original book in the first place. It's annoying when they don't even try. Like, is that clear? Is that making any sense? Or am I just kind of going on a tangent, not making a point?
I get what you're saying.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So, yeah, let's talk about the good and bad of adaptations. I've kind of shared how, you know, I've kind of shared briefly how, like, it's conflicting for me because obviously adaptations, or an adaptation of my story, means it'll be more accessible to more people, right? Like, as a movie, it's accessible to a very wide audience. As a adaptation, like as a video game adaptation especially, like I've thought about that for a long time now and how unique that could be. But losing control of something that I've spent so long working on, for better or for worse, I know that Xeno itself has its flaws. I know that things that, you know, Tyler's brought up and people have previously brought up with Xeno, I acknowledge the flaws. However, that is still within my control to fix. And if I don't have that control to make things right on my own, that worries the fuck out of me.
So you mentioned my name and I was summoned. A note on adaptations. I think I should start by saying one of the worst ones I've seen, and this is going to be a very controversial topic, is The Witcher. I've read all the novels and short stories. I've played all 3 games, and I finished the TV series. Not the original TV series either, because no one remembers way back when they created a Polish Witcher, which only lasted for about 1 season.
Looking that up right now.
It's not good. Don't bother. I'll tell you that right now.
Okay, never mind.
It's very bad, very B-rated. It was dumbed down, and a lot of the content was ripped out completely. The games, of course, were actually a continuation after the last novel. They were sequels, not rehashing the same old ground. And then the newest Witcher on Netflix is a retelling per se of the stories. They've missed a few short stories, but they weren't really important to the plot, and they also added in a whole bunch of things. I'm first going to talk about the games real quick, in that Andrzej Sapkowski, the writer of The Witcher and the creator of the whole world of The Witcher, sold the rights to CD Projekt Red for The Witcher, and all video game adaptations therein. And I do not believe he was consulted going forward into the games. If I remember correctly in an interview, and don't necessarily quote me on this, he was only paid something like 50 grand USD for the Witcher video game rights, and then tried to sue for more after the games got popular, because it really seemed like it wasn't going to go anywhere. Because at the time, the first Witcher TV series was an absolute flop. And if we're being honest, the first Witcher game wasn't the greatest either. It was only in the second and third that it became really good, and he started to, care about what he was missing out on. Then when we get to the Witcher TV series, they've taken quite a bit of creative liberty to just add and add and add story to it. And the one defining story they added was Yennefer's story. Yennefer, despite being Geralt's love interest, is not that prevalent in any of the books. We hear about her story, but primarily we see things from Geralt's perspective. Occasionally, we get a little perspective from somebody else, but we don't go through Yennefer's whole childhood in first person and her whole training at Eretuz and all that. And if I'm being honest, they did not honor the creative vision in the slightest by doing that. They really separated out the fact that Geralt was the main character. And instead, they did a triumvirate of Geralt, Ciri, and Yennefer, and added a whole bunch on to the other two stories that never existed in the first place. And as a writer, that would irk me to no fucking end. You're pulling up and fleshing out these characters, great, but you're doing so at the expense of, the titular character. I wouldn't have even called that series The Witcher. I would have called it The Witcher, the Sorceress, and the Surprise Child, because it was not about Geralt as much as it should have been. And yeah, I never want to be adapted. If I'm entirely honest, I could care less. If two people in the world read my book and they're both my parents, I will be more than happy. My creative vision is my own, and a company trying to make money off of me can suck it.
That's a fair point. That's a very fair point. I think when you consider The Witcher and how they, like, I don't want to necessarily just say retold the story of Geralt, but really expanded on Ciri and Yennefer. That also happened in another series that I really, really love, and we've talked about it before on the podcast. But basically, to kind of, I understand where Tyler's coming from and how, as the original intent, like you as the author originally had your vision for this story going forward, for your protagonist and for all the other characters. It can admittedly be frustrating when they decide to suddenly more focus is being placed on other aspects of the world instead of this one thing that you have really tried to perfect. Like, I understand that. I can't speak for Tyler, but I definitely can understand. However, that in itself isn't always a bad thing, because it is through adaptations that you get, I guess you get more fleshed out characters, and I'm offering like the opposite perspective to that. It's through adaptations that you get more creativity from a wider spectrum of people, not just the authors, which I can admit isn't always the most important. Like, adaptations are taking not necessarily not necessarily cherry picking bits, but like it is obviously adapting like the story and the magic of your characters and your world setting and all that into like for other audiences. And while that doesn't always work, for me personally, it did work in The Witcher, and it also worked in Shadow and Bone, the Netflix series, which we have talked at long length about in specifically episode 39. That was our Shadow and Bone episode. But it's through adaptations that flesh out, or it's through an adaptation that we were able to get the Crow's perspective in the Netflix series. If it was just a retelling or a direct adaptation of Shadow and Bone itself, it would be solely focused on Alina Starkov, which, to be honest, after reading the first book and considering just most of the story being within just Alina's perspective, it certainly was a little bit like there isn't really much to that. The Crow story offers a really nice contrast to Alina's main story, which I've referred to in the episode, and it's an example, I think personally, of an adaptation that works hella good.
If I may counter slightly on The Witcher. I may not. Oh, 1 second.
I'm kidding.
She's kidding.
Sorry.
Wait, you're not Guildmaster. What's going on?
She's.
Am I not? Are we sure?
It's about time I revealed the secret of this channel. Like, Brooke has always been the one running it. I have
Brooke,
to clear
your editing skills on point.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like she comes up with the ideas. She like organizes the meets. I'm just the messenger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
On the note of Witcher, I like what you said in that adaptations can expand and show us different perspectives. But my counter to that is open universes, and which is why I'm writing an open setting. And I always think The Witcher should have been an open setting. It's why Star Wars in its heyday was an open setting. It's why the Cthulhu mythos of Lovecraft is an open setting. Instead of, half rehashing, but then showing the perspective of another character, why don't we just allow another author or the same author to write something from that character's perspective? To me, that would work a hell of a lot better. Because if I'll be honest, the writers even did Yennefer wrong in The Witcher. Having read her emotions and drives in the books, I think they did her really dirty in The Witcher. She was a very weak character, in my personal opinion.
Interesting. We should do a Witcher episode, Tyler. Because I'm not familiar. Yeah, I'm not familiar with the books. I only know the series, but I guess, yeah, like, considering context, like, I can say that the series is great, but I haven't read the books. So, aside from that, then, let's continue on with talking about adaptations. So I'll touch in with Gabe, Brooke, and Marie-Soleil if you guys want to offer insight. Again, I'm not picking out any names. I'm not a teacher.
Yeah, I love this when you call their names and suddenly all of them unmute, but no one speaks. It's wonderful. I'm just waiting.
The awkwardness of speaking at the same time. It happens too many times that we'll all speak at once, and then we all stop, and then we all try again.
Yeah, fair.
I'll go first if nobody else is going to step up.
Yeah, go for it.
When I think of adaptations and why I don't like the idea of adaptations, I think of the movie Aragon based off of the book, and like everyone, like you look at the reviews and that movie was bad. The reviews say it was bad, and it was. And you look at it compared to the book, and they're not even like the stories are characters with the same name, and that's about where the similarities end. It veered so far off that there are no more movies for the other 3 books in the series. I think there's 3 books in the series. And people who just didn't read the book because they thought it was going to be shitty because the movie was shitty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like it's like if people are marketing the fact that like it's being adapted from a famous series, then suddenly because movies are so accessible, right? Not everyone has time to read a book, but 2.5 hours watching a movie, sweet. If that doesn't leave an impression on you, then what's to say, how are you as a person, like how are you as a fan going to be investing in a future movie, right? Let alone the rest of the series. Right, like it definitely like through Shadow and Bone, I won't elaborate on it too much, but basically, if the series itself didn't work, there would not, like, Shadow and Bone as a thing, as a book series, people wouldn't even consider buying it. But because it worked out really well, I would go into I've checked into 3 different chapters. There were no copies of Shadow and Bone, Siege and Storm, Ruin and Rising. Pretty much all of the Grishaverse books were completely gone because of how great the series was. People loved the series, so they were like, I'm gonna go read the book. I want to see I want to discover what all of this fuss was about for the series. Yeah, and I'm not familiar with Aragorn, but I definitely do, like, I have met people who have been, like, frustrated with it, to say the least, about its adaptation, so.
It was one of those where, like, after I watched the movie, I wasn't allowed to watch it again because I complained so much while watching the movie. This didn't happen in the book. That's not what happened. Why are they doing this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can go on that, or we can do that again because it's fun ranting at some point.
One of our favorite dates is complaining about things. I love it.
That's really cute. I approve. If that approval meant anything, but anyway, let's touch on
the guild master has condoned this marriage.
Stop calling me the guild master. It's too much on me. I'm not even the actual one. It's Brooke.
Ordained.
Secret.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. I need to keep the secret intact. There are some people who still don't know. Speaking of which, Brooke and Gabe, let's touch in with you guys on adaptations.
Okay, me. Yes.
Okay.
Me. My turn.
Okay.
I'm gonna do the opposites of the bad things because I think when I was trying to think of adaptations, the ones that were coming to my head were actually where the films were better, such as like Ready Player One and the Maze Runner trilogy, because I definitely saw the Maze Runner like years before I read the Maze Runner books, and when I finally got the Maze Runner books and I was reading them, I was like, what the hell is going on here? Like, I could see why people were upset when Maze Runner first came out, because it's so incredibly different after like the first book. Even the first book had different ending, I think, compared to the first movie. Slightly, but I think what they did was better because I don't know. Okay, it's been a while since I've actually read the book, so it's kind of hard to explain exactly what was wrong with them. But the way that they adapted the story and made it flow nicely through the three movies, it worked perfectly for the screen. Like, those were movies. It was a movie plot. We had great characters. We had motivations that worked. Everything flowed through from movie to movie. Well, we didn't get that in the books. The books felt a lot more choppy, in my opinion. Plus, there was a lot of confusion in why things were happening. I mean, there's still like plot holes in the movies, but that was because like you can't fill something that is deeper than the Mariana Trench.
Mm-hmm.
But they still made it work in the movies, right? But in the books, it's like they ended. I just remember like finishing the books and being like, that was not great. But finishing the movies is so satisfying, even if it does leave us kind of on a little bit of an edge. They just
Mm-hmm.
made it more consumable, like easily consumable. It makes sense. It's good entertainment.
Yeah, I'll give you.
Same thing with like. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I'll give you credit where credit's due when it comes to the Maze Runner. I think when you have the idea of this giant ass maze where your key characters are being held in, where there's like complex systems and whatnot, it's probably nice to have just the visual elements already. Like, there are some strong people who like envision how the worlds work and whatnot, but the thing is, like, for me, when I kind of skimmed through the first Maze Runner book and then I compared to the Maze Runner movie, I really enjoyed just how the screenwriters and stuff like actually drew out the maze. Like, it might not have been to everyone's taste, but certainly it helps paint a bigger scope and kind of really capture just like, holy shit, this is a giant ass maze and stuff. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's, I guess, like, you know, kind of wrapping up, like, through adaptations you actually like expand a lot, I think. But yeah, Brooke, I'll let you continue.
I just wanted to touch briefly on like Ready Player One because my family watched that movie together and we really liked it. We were just like, oh, this is a very fun, entertaining movie with a lot of pop culture references and young, interesting characters, and it's cute. And then I read the book for the first time, I think last year, and I was like, oh my god, what is this? What in what? And I tried to convince my mom to read it, and with my reaction, she's like, I think I'm going to not read it and just continue to watch the movie. And I was like, fine, that's fair, because the movie does a very good job in like creating a world that's very fun. Like, it gets rid of like a lot of the plots, like the whole paying to go to different worlds and Wade being like really poor and like not being able to actually access the oasis like everyone else does, and also just being a major absolute douche noggin dipweed. And we actually like him in the movie. He's still cringy, but that's just normal teenage boy.
Mm-hmm. Speak for yourself, Brooke.
I really like. Sorry, I shall. I really like that they brought like all 5 of the characters together into the high five team. That was really cute. Like reading that in the book and seeing that not being the same was honestly heart wrenching. I was like, I really like them together as a team. It just felt a lot. Definitely like a more fun, happy, and exciting movie compared to the book. Which I suppose if you wanted to have like specific feelings and like vibes going for, it definitely does not do that book any justice because the vibes were totally off from that. But I think it benefited that way. It's just a lot more of an enjoyable story.
Right. It's funny you decided to talk about Ready Player One because I know one other person who has a lot to say on that, and I don't think we've ever given him enough time to. So, Gabe, you want to?
I don't know if this is the episode for it, but I read Ready Player One before I watched the movie because I read Ready Player One like several years, and yeah, Ready Player One, the book is like it's like a fever dream. Like you read it and you're like, is this real? Am I having a panic attack right now? I don't think I liked the movie very much either, but it was definitely like a more the main character was a lot more tolerable. He wasn't as much of an incel. And like I mean personally I found all the like the amount of pop culture references just like a little bit like I was like, okay, like chill. But I think in the movie it's definitely a lot more tolerable because it's like a movie. It's like I'm seeing them happen, and it's like if I catch one, it's like oh that was neat. Or like if it happens on screen, I'm like, oh okay, that's kind of cool. That's like in the background there, or that's in the. But in the fucking book, there's no chance for that to happen because fucking the author goes through point by point to explain every single pop culture reference that he wants you to burn in your brain. And it's a totally different experience, and it's like much worse, I think, in the book. Yeah,
with references.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah, I remember like early on in the chat, like you were like it's coming back to me now, but like you were sending like little excerpts from I think like Ready Player One and Ready Player Two, and I couldn't believe
Ready Player Two. I still haven't read it because the bits that I've read of it made me want to like.
Are you planning to read it?
I'm planning to read it eventually. I plan to do a lot of things.
Why?
But
after the shit you've sent into the chat, how the hell would you still? You know what? I don't know.
It's part of the process. It's part of the process.
It's like going through. From what I've seen, I seriously, and this is
a fucking line of dialogue where he says that if Jesus was real, he would have said "wubba lubba dub dub" on the ground. That's like a real. This is a real fucking line from the book.
Seriously, this is a whole fucking tangent, but like everything that you've sent about Ready Player 2 just feels like a horrible copy pasta.
It feels.
It starts off with a shit ton of sex.
It does.
What?
It's just a bunch of sex.
Oh my god.
He went from just banging sex dolls in his hotel, being completely bald, to smashing the lovely lady.
Oh my god.
Hours on end in the first week.
Fucking hell. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Ready Player 2 is a book written by a 50-year-old man, and the first fucking chapter is descriptions of a week-long sexcapade between two teenagers. So make of that what you will.
Oh my god. Okay.
Ready Player One that wasn't even the example I had prepared to talk about.
Yeah, go ahead.
I did want to talk about adaptations as a positive too, though, because I've seen there's this. Hang on, wait, give me a sec. Okay. There's this one movie called fucking Snowpiercer. And it's one of my favorite movies ever made. It's like I watched this movie like it's like fucking crack cocaine to me. And it's based on a graphic novel that's of the same name. And aside from the fact that the basic premise of train in the snow apocalypse, and there's a train, and there's people who are trying to get off the train. That's like the similarities begin and end there. Like Snowpiercer, the movie, has almost like nothing in common with the graphic novel in terms of the actual story, any of the fucking characters, any single plot beat. It's like a completely different thing. But what I had a whole thing written about this that I've rambled out of, but I had a whole thing written that I wrote down before the podcast as like a point I wanted to make on adaptations. But basically, like, I feel like it's like a solid case, I think, for like, I think adaptations as a concept are like, it's one thing to like you like remaining super accurate to the book is like very awesome if that's what you want to do. And like there's a lot of situations where people will change shit for like no fucking reason and make it ridiculously worse. But I think adapting is like, it's not just like it's like a oh, I read this and then I'll spit back. I'm a movie machine. I'll spit back out a script that's based on the thing. You have to have like, it's sort of an art form in itself. You have to have a competency in two different art forms, because you have to, like, if you're reading a book, then you have to read and understand what made the book good and like what you liked about it, and then sort of as a movie director you have to transform that into something that you think is like special to you. And like if it doesn't, whether or not it bears an incredible amount of resemblance to the book is like, it can still be good if it's something that like you can tell someone put their heart and soul into and like has either the essence of the book or the essence of like someone who really loved the book. Because like the Bong Joon-ho, I imagine he'd have to be like a big fan of the book. I haven't read interviews where he says so, but like I imagine that has to be the case in order for him to make an adaptation of it. But I forgot the point I was trying to make, but basically, yeah, I think adaptations can be really, really good, even if they're not true to what it is, as long as like whoever is making it has, unless like it's unless like it's something where the original creator is involved, then yeah, totally. Like if it's like Shadow and Bone, Lee Bardugo worked on that show a lot, so that show, like remaining true to the story, is very understandable because she was heavily involved in that. But I don't think the guy who wrote the original the original Snowpiercer graphic novel like had anything to do with the movie. So like I don't know. I feel like there's definitely one aspect of me as a writer that like if I ever got a movie adaptation, like there's one aspect of me that's like oh, I want it to be like completely true to the source material. But then there's another part of me that like thinks about Snowpiercer and is like, well, maybe like
there's a chance it could be like, holy shit, this is so much like it
something
might not
completely different, but still like amazing in its own right. Like something like an adaptation can be amazing. What I'm trying to say is, I guess an adaptation can be amazing if someone doesn't just like adapt it straight up or adapt it and make changes here and there, but like takes it and makes something completely new out of it.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes any sense.
I think to kind of elaborate on that and to kind of close off the conversation on adaptations, actually, it's really just understanding the magic. I call it the magic, like I've called it the magic before whenever I've referred to it, but it's understanding the source material, like really understanding not just like character motivations and world building, like nuances and all that stuff, but it's truly understanding just why people love this story in the first place. Like if you can absolutely, like if you in your own way can understand and adapt that specialty and amazingness that a story has, like I think yeah, certainly adaptations can be amazing. However, as an author, I do acknowledge that that is a risk, especially nowadays, because there are, I don't want to say maybe it's a rampant problem, but like certainly there are a lot more books to movie adaptations lately, which in itself is a risk, right? Like it might not always be a Snowpiercer, it might not always be a Shadow and Bone. Who knows? It might just end up being another Shadowhunters. But I think kind of coming out of this conversation and really segueing into the next one, we have a pretty nice split of opinion, actually. So Tyler and Marie-Soleil in their own way have vouched that adaptations can be risky, and more or less it can suck when it doesn't work out, really. However, Brooke and Gabe here have argued that, you know what, adaptations can be good, and when done right, and I think when handled with care, it can certainly bring out a whole nother level of a story that, you know, a certain group would have understood, but now more people will probably be able to buy into it. So I think in addressing that split, and for our final kind of topic for tonight, let's talk about just how true to a creative person's original vision should we stick to. And I think personally it's different. I guess like I'm probably the one who is good to kind of kick this off, because it's conflicting for me, because I certainly don't want my messages behind Xeno to be misconstrued or misrepresented, because I've gone on podcasts before saying how important Porter is as a bisexual, half white, half black character. I'm trying to best represent a relationship, or not a romantic relationship, but just like this interesting dynamic between Porter and Magna, and how important they are as a depicted couple throughout the book. And maybe it's just my initial trust issues with previous media that's kind of has that risk like at the forefront, but I can completely understand when adaptations can go right, such as I guess, for example, like I was touching on queer stories, the She-Ra cartoons are apparently wonderful. They're apparently wonderful cartoons that have a lot of good queer rep, and it's that kind of media that, while it may be risky, when it pays off like that, that must be like hella rewarding for its audience, especially for queer audiences who are like really wanting that kind of representation. But I think that's just on one aspect of it. I guess, yeah, as an author personally, how true to a vision should we stick to? I don't want to just do a cop out and say it depends, but I think for me, I personally would want to stick to my like original intent, as long as it is still something that people agree with. And I say that because I'm open to change. I'm open to new ideas. And for any publishers listening, I hope this is good to say. I hope this is a good sales pitch, but like, I'm open to learning more. I'm open to understanding more about the characters that I've spent so long developing, because maybe there's something that you don't see or maybe there's something that you see that I don't. However, there is a certain nuance and magic with my story that I also will protect with my life at points, because there have been countless stories before it that have tried and failed, and there likely will be countless stories that have tried and fail, that will try and fail, and I cannot allow Xeno to do that. So I guess to answer the question again, if my vision aligns with yours, then more power to you.
So I'm speaking from a multimedia perspective on this, in that how true to creative's original vision should we stick to. And I'll talk for a moment about covering a song. You don't often see a cover of a popular song changing too many of the lyrics. If it does, you'll often hear a remix, which is more often taking a piece of the song as a sample and changing that up. But a true cover, an adaptation, if you will, is word for word. And that's how I feel more about adaptations than anything else. So when you ask how true to a creative's original vision should be stick, I say like glue, personally. And that's not to say other people's opinions on the work or ideas about the work should go unheeded. That's what critiques are for. But I'm a very big proponent of intellectual property and the rulings behind that. And as such, if we're doing a movie adaptation of a book, you should always involve the author as long as they're still alive. And I think any studio that doesn't is a blatant cash grabber. And any director that doesn't consult the original vision is a stubborn prick. And I can say that having read interviews of directors who have done such adaptations, and I do not like the idea that someone's original work is now being filtered through someone else's perception for me, good or bad. If the original work was not that great, it is not a director's right to change it, in my perception. Now, if the author is dead, there's different stories. We can talk to their living relatives, see if they would be okay with the person's vision. And again, a cover is one thing. A reimagining or loosely based off of is different. But if we're talking a straight adaptation, I'm a word for word. I don't care if Harry Potter had to be 18 movies to fit all the different little side stories in. I would have preferred that. It would have meant they were staying true to the vision and the heart behind it, and less trying to make it palatable. Because as a human being, I hate it when things are made palatable to me, and that's just me. I would prefer to swallow a really hard pill than have it coated in sugar. As long as I need the pill, that is.
All right. Very well said. Marie-Soleil, how about you?
I agree. And I think that if, let's say, there is something problematic in the original text and you wanted to change that for the movie, well, did you choose that text? And if, let's say, the director wanted to like diversify the cast of a movie when the book was not diverse enough and the author says no, stop the movie. It's my opinion. If you can't agree on how it's going to be adapted, then don't make the adaptation. If you need to change something, like let's say the technology in the book universe is more advanced and we can't do that with our current like CGI and everything, well then postpone it. Wait, the concept for the movie, the Avatar, like the space Avatar, that one, not Avatar: The Last Airbender, that movie sucked. And they go into to a different planet, that one. They had to wait so many years before they could actually make it because they didn't have the technology at the time to make it into the movie that they wanted. If you can't do that by turning a book into a movie, then wait. If you disagree with the author, then don't make that book into a movie.
Fair enough. Brooke, how about you?
Something I was thinking of while thinking about this episode earlier in the day was like adaptations and creative visions are more than just like doing a book to movie or something like that. And we've been talking about directors, which I'm happy about. Because I was thinking about things like actors themselves often play a massive role in who the character is as a person. And something that I was thinking about was when actors know that their character is like overdoing it, like they're going on too long, like Johnny Depp thinking that Jack Sparrow just was getting overused and he no longer had the relevance that he needed in the movies, because Jack Sparrow was never really like a main character. He was a driving force in Will and Elizabeth's story, but he was just so iconic that they dragged him out for so long. But even Johnny Depp knew that he just wasn't Jack Sparrow anymore. Or in The Last Jedi, Mark Hamill was very upset with the way that Luke was being directed. And it makes me really upset that Mark wanted to have a conversation about Luke and how he would have actually behaved and acted. And he was very upset that he had to act out this way that he thought Luke wouldn't have behaved. And I agree with him. A lot of my fans agree with him. But it wasn't his call, unfortunately. And then I think about things like with Wonder Woman. Apparently Patty Jenkins had an ending that she really liked, but when she brought it to the studio, they're like, no, we need to have a big fight. And that's how we ended up getting the big, stupid boss battle god fight at the end that everyone said just brought down the movie because it just didn't feel authentic anymore. Like, that wasn't her vision, but they made her put it in. And I sometimes think about just how different movies might be if it didn't have outside influences, or if actors were allowed to make calls on the character like that, like Mark might have been able to do with Luke.
Mm-hmm.
But you never know, like, which way it should go, like one way or the other. Like Patty Jenkins's Wonder Woman might have been better if it hadn't had that fight in it, but some studios will put in changes that make the movie better.
Yeah, and I guess to quickly touch on this, I won't elaborate on it too much, but the reason for this episode's, I guess, initial inception was kind of based on an example of that, because Warner Brothers and DC have had a pretty tumultuous relationship, to say the least, particularly when it came to Zack Snyder's version of Justice League. And I really wanted to touch on that because, be it, you can have your opinions about the Snyder Cut as much as you want. However, more or less, it's marketed and feels to be Zack Snyder's original vision for it, which then he will live and die by those choices. If people love it, wonderful. If people don't, he has to learn why. I think studio involvement is a whole other conversation, but I agree, Brooke. Like, if whatever choices and intent the creator had, it should be honored as much as possible. I guess with that being said, let's touch in with Gabe to help close us off.
All right. So I've been looking at this because I knew I wanted. It's interesting that I talked about Snowpiercer in the last segment, because I knew I wanted to talk about Snowpiercer for a segment, but I didn't. I sort of like jumped the gun on it being less of it, because I actually want to talk about Snowpiercer, but in this segment too, because as ironic it is that Snowpiercer is a movie that like takes a fuck ton of liberties with its source material. It's also a movie that like had to go through a lot of bullshit, because it's like, okay, so the movie's basically, it's technically a South Korean production, but it got like financial backing through fucking Weinstein. And basically what ended up happening through a lot of the production was like Weinstein spent the entire like post-production process of the movie like trying to fuck with it and make it more Hollywood friendly, and like trying to make all these changes, and like trying to like, there was a version of the movie where Chris Evans has like a voiceover narration. He wanted to change the ending. There's this insane sequence involving a fucking fish and some axes that Weinstein wanted to cut out of the movie. And it's kind of a funny story. I'll post a link to it later, but Bong Joon-ho basically lied to him and said that the scene had like sentimental value to him when it had none, but he bought it in the scene stayed in. But like, as for a bunch of the other stuff, because he like went against the studio so much, the movie didn't end up getting cut a lot, because like but from what I know, it didn't get like cut down a lot. There was no narration added. The ending wasn't changed. It still has the bleak, fucked up ending that it has, but it got fucked in terms of its marketing and like its release. It, as far as I know, it didn't get a huge release like in Canada at least. It probably got a bigger release in places like New York and LA. But I know that in Canada, it's not a movie. It didn't come out in the big Cineplex theaters. It basically only showed at like really small movie theaters, and I had to travel for an hour to go see it. And then like, and so yeah, that's like, I think that's sort of an example of it like not happening, but like of just Hollywood studios trying to fuck with like a creator's vision. And like that shit happens in Hollywood all the time. That's one of the reasons that I've sort of like been like disillusioned with movies, because like there's a reason that like Blade Runner has 100 different cuts. That's like, because the same fucking thing happened with Blade Runner. There's the like original vision. Whether or not that's the director's cut or the final cut, we can debate that all day, because I don't know what the answer is. Someone who's probably more educated on Blade Runner history probably knows. I don't know, but all I know is that the theatrical cut is not the original one, because that's the one that has a botched in Harrison Ford voiceover, and like a different, more like Hollywood tone. It's a lot shorter. It's more cut down, and like, yeah, it's very demoralizing whenever I see like a movie get like whittled down to its bare essentials and have a bunch of like Hollywood shit thrown in for the sake of like, oh, we got to make it more. We got to make it more like everything else.
Mm-hmm. So I guess then if like, I know answering if like how true to it creator's original vision is more complex than a simple yes or no, where would you kind of fall along with that?
Like Blade Runner or Snowpiercer?
In general.
Oh, can you repeat the question?
So I'm basically just like asking the question. So I know that's like, I know that answering how true to a creative's original vision should we stick to, it's more complex than a simple yes or no. But after bringing up Snowpiercer and bringing up Blade Runner and accounting for Brooke's example or Brooke's examples and what we had been talking about, where would you kind of like, what is your opinion on that?
I think if like someone is making something that's original, then yeah, you should probably stick to their ideas with it, and not like, it's not. I don't really agree with like when like it getting bogged down with like homogenization.
Mm-hmm. Find that thing, I guess, just like, I've already said it before, but I guess as like final words, I guess there is almost always magic when it comes to our individual stories. There is something special that we as creative writers and creative people in general put into our stories that might not always translate well when it comes to our audiences, but there is something there. Whether it's our original intent that is the magic that people see, or maybe it's just magic that they see in their characters, or maybe it's magic that they create on their own. There is something there. And if you're going to try to honor that as best as you can, be it from a film writing perspective, a video game perspective, like, it's ultimately just best, I think. I don't want to speak for everybody, but it really is best to honor that as much as possible. You don't have to directly translate it all the time. You can always try to spin it in a new and fresh way, but we pour so much into making our stories, and it just angers us to no end when we don't see that. So I think that's it. I don't really have much else to say. Anyone else want to quickly touch on something, or?
I think I'm all good.
Everyone good? All right. I guess then let's just start closing off for the night. So thanks everybody for listening in. You can find the Ink Guild individually or collectively in our social or in the social media down below on YouTube. However, if you're listening on Spotify, we are on YouTube. That is our home. I guess that is our home base. However, we are also on Twitch, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. Just kind of doing our own thing. If you came from any of those places, please let us know. We'd love to know where you've come from. And other than that, I guess for a closing segment, I think so I'll pose the question to everybody. If you were to get your idea finished, so like if you were to write out a short story or your novel, how would you like to see it adapted? Like, what medium would you want to see it adapted into? And I think I've told this to Gabe before, and I've been pretty evident with it in a podcast maybe, but I would love to see Xeno as a video game. I think the kind of story that I'm aiming for hasn't really been explored in video games before, and I think given the emphasis and I guess love and care that video game stories have been having lately, I think Xeno more or less would be I would love to see just what like Santa Monica or Sucker Punch do with that property. And I mean, like, as a person who loves playing video games, like it allows like so much room for not just my own vision to be expressed, but multiple people to chip in and see where they go from there too. But yeah, let's ask Gabe, what would you like to see? I guess, because you're doing Lemon Heart, what would you like to see Lemon Heart adapted as?
I honestly haven't given it a ton of thought. Like, I've always felt like, okay, like if Lemon Heart gets super successful, which I'm doubtful, but like if it does, I mean, I feel like whatever I feel like if I had carte blanche on like if I had like the Miracle publishing deal and I got like
Hold
some
on,
creative freedom.
Gabe. Sorry, if I may interrupt.
Am I not coming through?
No, you're coming through just fine. I just need to go to the washroom. So,
okay.
I'll let you finish up. Then Brooke, then Marie-Soleil, then Tyler. Okay, I'll be right back. Bye, guys.
Okay, so basically, yeah. What I'm basically getting at is like I think either. I mean, I would definitely be down if for like a video game adaptation. I think that would be a lot of fun to work on. Like, I don't know. I haven't really thought about like what form it would take, but like I like post-apocalyptic video games, and I feel like well, I mean, Lemon Heart is like very opaquely inspired by Fallout, so I feel like a Fallout inspired game would be the form it would take, and in lieu of the fact that we're probably never getting another legit Fallout game in that series that isn't made by fucking Bethesda, which I will never play one of their Fallout games. I'd be down as hell to see like some Obsidian dudes make a fucking Lemon Heart adaptation. I feel like that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Brooke should be next on the list.
Is it me? Oh, okay. Well, I always say I have the movie of the mind going in my head. So I think when I think about adaptations, I'm just thinking of movie. I don't really care because I don't think I'll ever get to the point where it get adapted, but movie, yeah.
Nice. I'm back, by the way. Holy shit, I'm sorry. That was rude. Anyway, I believe it was Marie-Soleil, right?
Yeah. I think if I was gonna have a serious adaptation done, I'd like a TV show. If it was gonna be like, if it had to be not by the books word for word what I wrote, then probably like a parody musical, like a Harry Potter musical.
Oh,
If they aren't going to go exactly how it's written, then I want to go that direction.
Star Kid, if you're listening to this, I love you. Thank you for doing that. I don't know where I'm going on. Tyler, I know you have reservations about adapting, so do you have one in mind?
Well, given the piece I'm working on, specifically the Mythic Cosmos, I like the visions I'm putting in of just, scope of space and science fiction, and I think it could be really well captured in a graphic novel. I think teaming up with an artist with a good style and an eye for vision and scope could really, really sell it well, because obviously a lot of my descriptions are very concrete in hard science fiction, and as such, being able to work that into a picture would just save so much room for dialogue and facial expression anyways, that I think it'd be really easy to actually stay true to the vision.
I agree. From what I've known about the Mythic Cosmos, it would be a really nice looking graphic novel.
I'm straight up debating getting an artist friend or two of mine to put together some scenes for promotionals and covers and the like, just because it lends itself well, I think.
I think so too. I guess then, with nothing more to be said, we are done for tonight. So, yeah. Thanks again, everybody, for listening in, and have a good night. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.